Hello everyone, my name is Guilherme and welcome to another massive multiplayer online role-playing game devlog. Yes, I'm doing an MMO, but don't worry, it's for fun and I'm doing great. I'm already failing at the schedule. As I said in the first video, in the second, I want to work on this project up to an hour a day, but every day to learn this discipline to work in a project in a long period of time. But I'm failing. But it's not a problem, to be honest, because I'm much more focused in the long term than the short term. So if I fail today or yesterday, I don't know, it's okay as long as I keep working on it and trying to improve. So I'm gonna try to improve and not fail. Don't worry about that. At least I guess I think so. So before I start doing this, talking about this, because in the last video we built the flow of the server and client communication. So I have here the message systems, and I said in the previous video that in this video we would define what is a message, okay, what is a header, what is a payload, and we're gonna have to do that for every single message. I'm sorry guys, but yes, but don't worry, I'm planning to edit this video and cut the I will type everything else and then cut and then explain, okay? So don't worry about that. It's also daytime here in actually it's also very early in the morning here in Brazil, so that's why you can see the sun behind me. But before we go ahead and do this, I'd like to answer some questions here that I'm receiving in the comments. It's a bit of a Q&A, but I'm not gonna waste your time, don't worry. But I just want to thank you guys that for the messages and the comments, because it's been amazing and it makes a lot of difference for me, because yes, this is the point here. I'm doing this kind of content exactly to interact with you. So if you haven't put a comment yet, take this moment to put. And the first thing that I said in the first video is that I needed ideas for what the game will be. Like, what is the game? What kind of content do we add to the game? What is the gameplay? And Voiling's Life, I'm sorry if I can't pronounce, said, here's an idea you can borrow. Basically, you have a city and an entrance to a dungeon which has 100 floors in total. Every so often, you have a safe level because you cannot quickly leave the dungeon or go back to the dungeon floor you were on. Maybe basic crafting for food and supply and workstations, making all workstation not possible. In the city, you can buy a house that you can decorate and buy workstation and put into the house, and maybe farms in the garden. But I really appreciated the first part of the message here, because he suggested that we could add like a floor system to the game, and everyone we're gonna have to like stare at the entrance of the dungeon and say, okay, let's figure out who we're gonna go further and further in the dungeon. And I think that's a great idea. I mean, they have some kind of competition to reach certain level in the game. I think that's valid, that's solid. We can like develop this idea, but I think it's a great idea. And another thing that I was not thinking about, but now I am, and I actually spent some time yesterday thinking about how I could use this flow here that we have to adapt to that, is to allow crafting system, because crafting may be great. Imagine you can like loot some items and then you can build your house, you can build like construction or anything you want. That may be great. And I have an idea, because I'm not gonna develop this idea now, because we need to get the basic things working. Like, it's the third video and we don't have any code yet, because well, we need to have some code. So but if we divide the map into chunks, we can have like a TCP message from the client saying like request chunk data. Just like we have like request user data, we can request the chunk data, and then the server may respond to the client with all the chunk data. Maybe it may be one message, like a long one, or multiple messages with small content. Probably multiple messages will be better, because the chunk may have too much items on it, and it's important to split that. But the question is, once the client retrieves this data, he doesn't need to keep retrieving everything again, because add an item, like build an item, you press a button and then you have an item on top, in front of you. This is an action, and deleting an item is an action as well. So after the client requests the chunk data, we can start sending to the client the chunk actions. So the client can perform this action, like add an object, remove an object in real time without having to fetch the entire data again. So it's a great idea, in my opinion. We'll see how this will turn out, but not now. It's an idea. Let's put this idea in the idea box, and I think it's a great idea. So thank you a lot, Voilin's Life, for the idea. If you have any idea or comment, please leave in the description, because I really appreciate to answer. And the other thing that I'd like to talk about here in this video, in this Q&A, it's a small Q&A. I don't want to waste a lot of time here, but I will answer more comments in other videos as well as in the comments below, of course. But Marek, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, I'm sorry, but Marek, or maybe even the first name, I don't know. I'm not going to read this because it's a lot of text, but you can pause the video if you want. But he was saying about Python, and that Python is very slow to do like a server on it, especially a massive multiplayer online on it. And I agree, Python have some limitations. It does have the GIL, which is the global interpreter lock, as you said here, and it may be like a better idea to do it in C++ to handle multiple thousands of users at the same moment. I agree with you, but honestly, as I said in the first video, in the end of the day, I'm just learning and having a lot of fun. And as much as I want to have thousands of simultaneously online connected players, I don't think that this is going to be a problem. I don't think that we're going to have 1,000 players connected to this. Maybe like something with 10 players or 100. 100, as I said in the first video, would be like a very, very, very good deadline, very good goal. And so in the end of the day, I think Python will be like enough for that. And if somehow, somewhere, this content here, this series starts to get a lot of traction and stuff like that, and we need to have like thousands of players, and Python starts to become a problem, I'm not sure. We need to test, we need to like validate, we need to have a solid graph saying like, hey, here we go with 200 players, Python, we're not going to handle that. It's too much for Python. It will slow down and stuff like that. If you reach this point, what we can do is rewrite the server in C++, and trust me, it's not hard, it's just tedious. Because the architecture, like the structure that I'm gonna use, will be pretty much the same for the C++ version of the server, and I will just have to rewrite and just change the syntax, maybe from Python to C++, something like that. It's not a huge problem, and the client side, it's not a problem at all to have this kind of to use Python, because the client will not have more than one connected like client at once. It will only need to handle himself, not the others. So the client, it's totally okay. Maybe the server, we got too many players, but don't worry about that yet. Let's just have some fun here and develop the game. Okay, so yeah, that's it. So now let's start developing the connection. Let's start figuring out what is a message, okay? And it's very simple. And again, we're gonna have to define, yes, what is every single message that we did in the previous video. But don't worry, I'm gonna pause the video and I'm gonna describe all of the messages, and then I will just explain. But I do the first message here live, so because I really want to be like as descriptive as possible here, because I don't see a lot of people talking about that. I had to go to the university to learn this kind of stuff because I don't see many people talking about it. So I'm gonna talk and hopefully you will learn something. And I'm changing this color to green because someone pointed out in the comments that actually to blue, because green was hard to read due to YouTube compression. So it's okay. Now it's blue, and I hope it's better. Okay. So the first thing, let me put a title here. Message type. And the first thing here that I'm gonna do, let me put this in as a header 1. And the first thing that we need to think is the header. What is the header? Because we've been talking about the header since the last video. And if you see here, everything that we described here in the previous video, like the message, this is a header, and another header. What is a header? A header is basically the message type specifier, because we need your program, we need your server, our server and client to know what is the message. Like, what did the client is sending a message? What is this? What kind of action is the client expecting us to take? And more than that, what kind of data is the client passing for us? Because like in the login message, for example, we need a header to say, hey, server, I'm passing the user plus password. So we define a header that is the login underline login, and then we're gonna pass the user and password. But if the server receives like login underline create, then it's user, password, and email. But if the server receives like client position, then the data will be completely different. So the header will basically specify the message type, and it will also define how much of data will the server / client. Let me just put the other side, because it's the same for the server and the client. Okay, it's not different. Like the server, we're gonna communicate to the client using headers as well, and vice versa. Okay. How much of data will the other side interpret the payload? So if you remember from the previous video, we have a message that is a header plus a payload. The payload can be 0, okay? And here's the structure. It's two-part, okay? Let me insert a table here, a simple one, and let me just put here. Here you go. Header, and then we have payload. Let me change the color to something a little bit better. So every time we send a message from the client to the server, or from the server to the client, we need to pass first a header and then a payload. And now we need to define the size in bytes of everything that we're gonna do. We're gonna send or receive in the project. Okay. So the header. Let me actually insert a column here in the right. Like in the left. Here we go. The header, you actually be 2 bytes. And why 2 bytes? I think 1 byte may be enough, because a byte, if you don't remember, if you don't know this, is 8 bits. So 1 byte in binary basically is 1, 2. Here you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a byte. Okay, 8 bits is equal to 1 byte. And the amount of message that you can, the amount of content that you can store here, and that's binary. I'm not gonna go into details of what is a binary format and stuff like that, but the important thing that you need to know is that 1 byte can store 2 at 8 numbers. That is 256. In other words, if my message is 1 byte, I will be able to have 256 different types of messages. And to be honest, that's more than enough. This is a lot of messages, and I think like now we have a very basic architecture here. That is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, less than 20 messages. But I'm gonna use 2 bytes that are gonna like do way more than that. It's 2 at 16, which is gonna be a lot of data, but I think that's enough. Okay, that's more than enough actually. And I keep it 2 bytes, for instance. Okay. And the payload will depend in the header, because if the header is a logging system, the payload will be a lot of stuff, because you're gonna have to pass a string with the username, and then another string with the password, and then another string for the email if the user wants to create a new account. If you want to talk about like the position, the client data, the payload will vary. Okay, so you're gonna be 0 to, I'm gonna put 1020 bytes. And why that? Because then a message here, you're gonna be in the maximum size of 1024 bytes. Okay, this is like that's a common thing, because we used to send and receive message of this size anyways. So I'm gonna make the payload a variant, and that's why we need to define a header, because we need to know what kind of data we send and receive in the payload. Okay, so this is basically that's basically it. That's basically everything that we need to define here to the structure of the message. So this means that every time that the user or the client sends or receives a message, it's gonna have this format. Okay, and if it doesn't have this format, it's not a valid message. We can decline a message. We can ban the user because the user is sending weird data to us. So yeah, that's it. This is the format. But now here's the long part. We need to describe what is every single message here. So I'm gonna pause the video real quick. Alright, took me a while, have no idea, the sun is not even here anymore, it's here, but I finished that. So I'm gonna go ahead and explain to you what I did here, and I'm glad I paused the video because it will be like almost an hour long of me just doing it. And yes, I'm always exceeding my time today. I'm not almost actually. But anyways, so we talked about the message type, and now we need to describe for every single one of those headers here what they are used for and what is the payload. For example, the first one here is the hello that the client you're gonna send to authenticate the client application. And if you go ahead here and see, I added a hello here, so here's the header, and it's from the client, so it is gonna be very easy for us when we start implementing this thing to see that we have a header called hello that the client you're gonna send. Okay, and it does not have a payload. Yes, because I said here that the header is a fixed 2 byte size, and the payload is 0 to 100,020. And in the case of the hello header, it's just an indication for the server, like, hey, I'm a client, I'm here, I wanna join the party. Okay, so we do not need a payload here, but then the server gonna return to the client the validate in, as we described it in the previous video, just right here, and it send a random string to validate. And here we're gonna have 16 bytes with a encrypted random string. So very straightforward. We can do it in Python. I can generate like my string I'm gonna hard code it. Like I can type A times 16 and my string. I don't know if you can read it, but I have like 16 characters in the string, and it's very easy in Python to decode, to encode a string. If I remember correctly, you just need to do it, and then you have a byte that is like every character here in this array is a byte. Okay, so we can literally send this to the client. It's basically like that. How it works, we're gonna get there. This is not the implementation video yet, but just for you to have an idea. So then the server is gonna send a validate in, and the client is gonna answer the validate out, which is also 16 bytes, and you're gonna have the decrypted random string. So the server will be able to figure out if this client is a valid one, and if it's not, you're gonna access denied. The server gonna return that to the client. No payload, because there's no need. Just send, hey, I'm not accepting you, get out, you are not my client. And then the client needs to close the client connection as well. So it's a great way, it's a great place to start adding some nodes for us when we start to implement this thing. So yes, and by the way, this is a documentation. So when I start to implement my code, I'm not gonna be how this looks like, how can I do it, how this data type gonna be, what I send, why do I have to send to the server, what do I have to send to the client, why it's not working, why everything is wrong, let me debug thing, let me try to remember. No, I'm writing documentation, because then when I start to implement this thing, I can just look up in this table and say, oh, access denied, there's no payload, I don't need to read any payload. Here you go, we are good to go, because when we implement this, I'm gonna have like a while loop that is gonna read the next 2 bytes of the message, and it's gonna be first the header, and then based on those 2 bytes, it's gonna go ahead and read the payload. But there, of course, if there's no payload, it will just continue to something else, and if there's a payload, it's gonna read the payload. So that's why I'm doing this thing. Okay. So if the server accepts, it's gonna ask for the login credentials. So here you go, I have a description here. Server asks for the client credentials for the login. No payload again, but now things are gonna get a little bit interesting, because the client can send a header saying, hey, I'm logging, I want to log into the server, and then the client is going to send the username and the password. And I'm doing like in 2 steps here. I need to define how many characters do you have in this username. So I'm using 2 bytes for that. It's not a lot, it's to 16. It's 65,000 options. I don't think this is a valid thing. I think we need to reduce the size of the string, because you definitely don't want to have a username with 65,000 characters. We don't want that. But I'll leave it for now, and I will just filter somewhere else to say, hey, please don't put not more than 32 characters, something like that. But it's okay for now. I'm gonna pass 2 bytes for the username size, and then the username is gonna be n bytes, 1 byte for every character. That's why you have these 2 steps, and it's the same thing for the password. This is a pattern, like every time you want to have a string, and that's why I kept 2 bytes here. I could do 1 byte, but I will not. Every time we want to pass a string, we need to do these 2 steps, okay? And it's the same for the login create, except that here I'm also requiring the email address of the of the client, okay, because we need to store that somewhere. Then the server may return the bad login with 1 byte to specify an error, like, hey, your username does not exist, or your password is incorrect. We need to return that to the user. The bad create as well, which is basically the same thing as the username, except that now it's for the creation of an account. So we need to say, hey, the username is taken, or the email is already in use. Okay, so we need to return that. 1 byte is enough, because again, it's 256 options. So you're not gonna have more than 256 errors. Please don't. So that's enough. And we finally have the login success. And this is interesting, and that's why I'm describing everything, because if the client succeeds to login, the server is going to answer with the user ID, because we will not share the IP address of the client anywhere. And every client is going to have a unique user ID. And you may think, hey, Guilherme, why not use the username? Because the username is also unique. Yes, but the username have a lot more data to do, because if you remember, it's a string, and right now the username can be 65,000 long. We're gonna limit that, but even if I make the username be like 256 bytes long at maximum, because I'm gonna have to do this string here anyways, it's still, we're gonna be way lot of data, more than we can have with only 2 bytes. And I think the user ID needs to be like 4 bytes at least, because 2 bytes, you're gonna limit the amount of user to the of our server to 65,000. So yes, I'm gonna change that everywhere, because I did that in a bunch of other places. But yes, we need to pass the user ID here, because the user needs to know himself. And then you have the in-game flow. I'm not gonna go ahead and describe everything, because, well, the text is already describing everything. So if you want, you can pause the video and read it. And I think it's a great idea to read it, because I did everything. And that you're gonna increase the speed when we start coding things. You're gonna be very fast, because we have like every kind of header, every kind of message, and the description what every message have. Okay, I think it's a great idea to put here like ID size is equal to 4 bytes, because let me put ID size. And then here the user ID, I'll just put this here. I'm not sure if there's a great idea, but I don't know. It's just better than the way that we were doing before, so I think it's a great idea. Because maybe in the future, I may want to change the ID size, okay? And I don't want to like keep changing this list again, because it's annoying. But yes, we have everything, and we can send like the client position as well, and receive the client position as well, the other client's position. And if you see here, I have like 12 bytes for the X, Y, and Z position. So I'm gonna use a float with 4 bytes each, of course, because it's the float size. 4 bytes for the Z, Euler rotation, I don't know how to spell that. And yeah, this is important. I'm using Blender, and Blender is like one of the few softwares where Z is actually up. So Z is this. So when I say Z rotation, I'm actually talking about this one, okay? Not this one, actually this one, as other game engines used to have in the Z axis. Z in Blender is this one, okay? So keep that in mind. And I'm also reserving a rally 4 bytes for the animation. Not sure how I'm gonna send the animation yet, because there's different approaches, but I'm probably not gonna need more than 4 bytes, maybe 6 bytes, but it's gonna be okay. And we can do everything. There's a bunch of other stuff here. Let me change it. User ID as well. ID size. We have the messaging system as well. Like we can send and receive message, and it's gonna be here just fine. Okay. Put this in bold. Forgot that. And that's actually very simple. That's basically it. We don't need like a lot more than this one to start coding the server. I think now we reached the point where we can, like, it's safe to say that we can start writing the server and the client. Okay, so maybe in the next video, I think probably in the next video, we can go ahead and jump to the coding, which is the fun part. Okay, but it was necessary to payload message descriptions, okay. It's a great idea to start describing, to start coding the actual game itself in the next video, because here we have enough data to start working on it. We have a lot of data actually. It's like 8 pages, good lord, 9 pages already of documentation, but that's very, very, very necessary. Okay, so in the next video we're gonna jump into the fun part and start coding. So folks, that's basically it. Thank you a lot for watching. I hope you learned something new in this massive multiplayer online role-playing game, and I hope that tomorrow we're gonna have another video. Okay, so I see you in the next video.